June 4, 1944. The English Channel is restless. Wind lashes the black water. Rain sweeps across the decks of thousands of ships waiting in silence. Somewhere beyond the darkness lies Normandy, quiet, occupied, and heavily defended. In southern England, airfields glow dim under storm clouds. Engines are ready. Paratroopers sit shoulder to shoulder. Rifles rest against knees. No one speaks much now. Inside a guarded room, maps cover the walls. Red and blue arrows point toward 5 beaches. Each arrow represents lives, tens of thousands of them. Clocks tick loudly. Radios crackle with fragments of weather reports. The storm outside is not part of the plan. It was never supposed to be this bad. A delay could expose everything. A wrong decision could doom the invasion. A single mistake, small, human, and almost invisible, now hangs over the largest military operation in history. By dawn, one choice will decide whether the Allies land or lose their chance forever. And to understand how everything came so close to failure, we must step back into the world that made this moment unavoidable. By early 1944, Europe had been at war for more than 4 years. The continent was scarred, exhausted, and divided by occupation lines that stretched from the Arctic Circle to the Mediterranean. Nazi Germany still controlled most of Western Europe. France, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Norway remained under German rule. Every day of delay meant more executions, more deportations, and more forced labor. For the Allies, time was no longer neutral, it was dangerous. In the East, the Soviet Union was absorbing and destroying German armies at a staggering cost. Cities like Stalingrad and Kursk had broken the myth of German invincibility, but millions had already died. Joseph Stalin demanded a second front in the West, one that would force Germany to fight on 2 fronts and finally relieve pressure on Soviet forces. The Western Allies had promised this invasion. Now they had to deliver. Operation Overlord was not simply an attack. It was an all-or-nothing gamble. The goal was to land Allied armies on the coast of Normandy, establish a secure foothold, and pour men, tanks, and supplies into France faster than Germany could respond. If it worked, Western Europe could be liberated. If it failed, the war could drag on for years or be lost entirely. Nothing like it had ever been attempted. Nearly 3 million Allied soldiers were assembled in Britain. More than 5,000 ships and landing craft were prepared. Over 11,000 aircraft were assigned to support the landings. Every detail, tides, moonlight, air cover, and secrecy had to align perfectly. There would be no second attempt. Germany would not be caught off guard twice. But as planning reached its final stage, one uncontrollable factor began to threaten everything: the weather. And as the invasion date approached, that threat grew harder to ignore. Normandy was chosen for reasons that went far beyond geography. It was within range of Allied air power based in Britain. Its beaches were wide enough for landings. Its defenses, while formidable, were weaker than those at the heavily fortified Pas de Calais. But this advantage came with a cost. Normandy faced the open Atlantic. Its weather was unstable, unpredictable, and often violent. German commanders understood this well. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, placed in charge of strengthening the Atlantic Wall, believed the invasion would come soon, but not during bad weather. He had seen Allied caution before. Storms, he believed, would delay them. German defenses were therefore built with the assumption that rough seas offered protection. Patrols were reduced. Some units were rotated. Senior officers planned leave. On the Allied side, secrecy was absolute. Entire armies vanished from public view. Dummy tanks and fake radio traffic were used to deceive German intelligence. Operation Fortitude convinced German command that the main invasion would strike farther north at Pas-de-Calais. The deception worked, but only as long as time remained hidden. Every delay increased the risk of exposure. The invasion window was narrow. Tides had to be low at dawn so obstacles could be seen. Moonlight was needed for airborne drops. These conditions aligned for only a few days each month. In June 1944, the key dates were June 5, 6, and 7. Then the storms arrived. By June 3rd, weather reports from the North Atlantic showed worsening conditions. Wind speeds rose, waves increased, clouds lowered. For landing craft packed with soldiers, this meant chaos. For aircraft towing gliders and carrying paratroopers, it meant disaster. If the invasion went forward in the storm, thousands could die before reaching the beaches. If it was delayed too long, German defenses would be fully alert. Between these two dangers stood a fragile decision, one that now rested not on generals or soldiers, but on imperfect science and human judgment. And it was here, in this narrow space between caution and courage, that the Allies faced their most dangerous mistake. June 4, 1944. Southwick House, near Portsmouth. The room is crowded with senior Allied commanders. Cigarette smoke hangs in the air. Rain drums steadily against the windows. Outside, the storm shows no sign of breaking. Inside, the pressure is crushing. General Dwight Eisenhower stands at the center of the room. As Supreme Allied Commander, the final decision rests with him alone. Around the table sit men who have spent their lives preparing for war. Admiral Bertram Ramsay, responsible for the naval landings. Air Chief Marshal Trafford Lee Mallory, in charge of the airborne forces. And General Bernard Montgomery, commanding the ground assault. Maps are spread across the table. Most forecasts are grim. High winds threaten to scatter landing craft. Heavy clouds could ground aircraft and blind bombers. Lee Mallory fears that airborne troops may be dropped too far from their targets, isolated and destroyed. Naval commanders fear that soldiers will drown before reaching the shore. At this moment, delay seems logical, safe, responsible. But delay carries its own dangers. Every hour that passes risks discovery. German patrols might notice the unusual silence. Reconnaissance flights could spot the massive fleet gathering off the coast. And if the invasion is postponed for weeks, the entire operation might have to be dismantled and rebuilt, an impossible task under enemy observation. Into this uncertainty steps Group Captain James Stagg, the chief meteorologist. His data is incomplete. Weather science in 1944 relies on scattered reports from ships, aircraft, and distant stations. There are no satellites, no real-time models. Stagg speaks carefully. He predicts a brief improvement in the weather, only a narrow window, beginning late on June 5 and lasting into June 6. It will not be ideal. Seas will remain rough, clouds will linger, but it may be the only chance. If he is wrong, the invasion could collapse. If Eisenhower waits and the window closes, the opportunity may never return. The room falls quiet, and in that silence, the war itself seems to pause, waiting for an answer that will determine the fate of millions. The night deepens at Southwick House. June 4 turns into June 5. Eisenhower listens, but he does not speak much. He walks slowly, hands behind his back, eyes fixed on the weather maps. Each man in the room understands the weight of what is being asked. This is not a question of tactics. It is a question of risk, measured in human lives. Some argue to wait. The storm is still raging. The sea remains dangerous. Others believe the brief break predicted by Stagg is real. The weather systems over the Atlantic suggest a temporary opening. It will not last long. If the Allies miss it, the next acceptable tide and moon combination will not come for weeks. By then, secrecy may be gone. Shortly after midnight, Eisenhower makes his decision. We will go. The order is passed quietly but quickly. Messages race across Britain. Thousands of engines are started. Ships begin to move. Paratroopers stand and check their equipment one last time. There is no turning back now. And then, almost cruelly, the weather worsens again. Winds rise, rain lashes the airfields. For hours it seems the forecast may have been wrong. Some commanders fear catastrophe. If the storm does not break, the invasion will go forward into chaos. But just before dawn on June 6th, the weather shifts. The rain eases. The winds drop slightly. Clouds lift just enough. The window, narrow, fragile, and temporary, opens exactly as predicted. Unbeknownst to the Allies, German meteorologists had concluded the opposite. They believed no invasion was possible in such conditions. Senior German officers were absent. Rommel himself was away from Normandy. The Allies had chosen the only possible day. Had they delayed, had they made the safe choice, the storm that followed on June 7th would have destroyed the landing conditions completely. The blunder was not what they did, it was how close they came to choosing the wrong day. And the consequences of that near mistake would only become clear after the beaches were taken. June 6, 1944. Dawn breaks over Normandy. The beaches are chaotic. Soldiers stumble into cold, churning waters. Waves crash over landing craft. Sand is churned into mud. Explosions punctuate the roar of the sea. Yet, despite the storm's fury, the invasion proceeds. American forces hit Omaha and Utah. British and Canadian troops strike Gold, Juno, and Sword. Paratroopers drop behind enemy lines, scattering in the morning fog, fighting to secure bridges and crossroads. The German defenses, expecting delay, are caught off guard. Some units respond quickly, but others are disorganized, uncertain, or absent entirely. By midday, thousands have reached the beaches. Casualties are high, nearly 10,000 in total on the first day, but the foothold is secure. Tanks slog through mud and gunfire. Medics wade into the surf to rescue the wounded. Ships offshore provide continuous bombardment, suppressing German positions. Aircraft crisscross the sky, strafing and dropping supplies. Behind the front lines, Allied commanders breathe cautiously. They know that the first day is only the beginning. Every second matters. Reinforcements pour in. Every lost hour could give the Germans time to recover. Yet the gamble has paid off. What could have been a catastrophic disaster becomes a beachhead for liberation. Strategically, the success of D-Day changes everything. Hitler is forced to commit more divisions to the Western Front. The tide of the war begins to shift irrevocably. Soviet forces in the east gain breathing space as Germany is drawn into a fight on two fronts. The Normandy landings mark the beginning of the end for Nazi control in Western Europe. Historians later note how close the Allies came to disaster. One wrong call, delaying the invasion by even a single day, could have exposed the fleet, alerted German forces, and allowed the Atlantic Wall to repel the assault. The weather window, so fragile and fleeting, was a decisive factor. Eisenhower's choice, informed by incomplete data and human judgment, becomes one of history's most consequential decisions. The beaches of Normandy are littered with equipment, blood, and debris, but amid the carnage, the first seeds of liberation are planted. The storm that threatened to halt the invasion instead becomes a hidden ally, cloaking the fleet and disorienting the enemy. D-Day succeeds not because the Allies were invincible, but because they navigated the narrowest of margins between risk and ruin. And in that success lies the truth of war. History is often shaped not just by the grandest strategies alone, but by moments of uncertainty, by fragile decisions, and by courage under pressure. From the chaos of the beaches, a new chapter in the fight for Europe begins, one that will lead inexorably toward liberation, but only because a single, near-fatal mistake was avoided. History often hinges on the smallest of choices. One storm, one narrow weather window, and one man's judgment changed the course of World War II. Eisenhower's decision to launch D-Day despite uncertainty was more than military calculation. It was a test of trust, courage, and timing. The Normandy landings remind us that even the largest operations, meticulously planned and executed by millions, are vulnerable to forces beyond human control. Nature, chance, and human judgment intertwine. One wrong call could have turned the beaches into a graveyard instead of a gateway to liberation. But amid chaos and danger, the Allies found precision in uncertainty. Soldiers braved surf and gunfire, commanders balanced risk and necessity, and meteorologists translated fragments of data into life-or-death guidance. Every life saved, every foothold gained, was measured against what might have been, a disaster narrowly avoided. D-Day's success was not inevitable. It was fragile, contingent, human, and it transformed the war. It drew German forces into a desperate struggle on the Western Front, relieved pressure on the Soviets, and gave hope to occupied Europe. It demonstrated that even in the machinery of total war, human decision, courage, and judgment remain decisive. In the end, the secret blunder was never fully a blunder. It was the near mistake that history narrowly escaped. It serves as a reminder that wars, like life, are shaped not just by grand plans, but by moments of uncertainty, by moments of choice, and moments when the right decision arrives just in time. And with that fragile success, the Allies moved forward, carrying with them the knowledge that history often balances on the edge of a single crucial decision.